call. Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Accident Compensation, Financial Responsibility and Transparency Amendment Bill, and if only the bill actually did reflect the title that it's been given, that would be great, actually. That would be a really good start, because those who have been following this debate might well imagine that this bill might be the bill that would actually stop the government from overcharging ACC levies, as that government has been, to the tune of $350 million a year, because they made a decision and it was announced publicly. They weren't even embarrassed about it. Judith Collins, when she was the ACC Minister, said they had set a levy that was higher than recommended by ACC in order to get to surplus. So what they were doing was they were unnecessarily hiking up the ACC levies in order to try and get the books into surplus, and guess what, Mr Speaker? They still failed. Even though they ripped off every worker and every company right across New Zealand with higher than necessary ACC levies, they still failed to get to surplus, and that's the record of this government. So here we are with the Financial Responsibility and Transparency Bill. Surely this is the bill that would say to the government, hands off, the ACC levies are only to be used for the outcomes of accidents and injuries, not for propping up your failure to get to surplus. Sadly not. Sadly not. What a missed opportunity. But the Labor Party can save the government from this embarrassment, because at committee stages we are here to help. At the committee stages, we will propose an amendment that will make it absolutely clear that the part of the bill, the part of the ACC Act, I should say, that requires the Minister to act in the public interest, we will put an amendment forward that clarifies that the public that with regard to this bill, it is the public interest in reducing accidents and injuries. It's not just the public interest in any old thing the government thinks it wants to do, like prop up its failure to get to surplus. No, no, no. Our amendment will ensure that the public interest argument can only be used in order to reduce accidents and injuries. And that's how it should be if this was truly an Accident Compensation, Financial Responsibility and Transparency Amendment Bill. So I'm looking forward to the government supporting that amendment, because if the name of the bill is going to be fulfilled, they will genuinely do that. I do want to put the government on notice, because at the moment there is a very tenuous agreement from the Labor Party towards this bill, and I'll explain why in a minute. But if they do not accept our amendment, then that is very likely to change, because clearly the bill is not going to deliver what it purports to do. Mr Speaker, it's actually even worse than that, because when people made submissions on this bill, they made submissions on the basis of a bill that came into our Select Committee. The amendments that the government members pursued in Select Committee once again have fundamentally changed the bill that was supported by many of the submitters. And I would hazard a guess, that in the amended form, many of those submitters would not agree with it. Here's one submitter I believe would not approve of this bill in its amended form: Business New Zealand. That's right, Mr Speaker. The Labor Party has found itself in the envious position of being in agreement with Business New Zealand, or should I say Business New Zealand has decided to agree with the Labor Party, that actually that the ACC levies must not be used to prop up the government's fiscal position. And that, in fact, was the submission from Business New Zealand. They came along to the Select Committee and said they wanted a change in the bill to reflect that. Well, the Labor Party is delivering exactly that change in the amendment that we will come forward with at the committee stages, because we don't believe in cheating the system in that way. ACC levies are, in fact, for improving and treating injuries and accidents at work, on the sporting field, and the home. That's the purpose for it, not propping up Bill English's failed attempt to get to surplus. So, Mr Speaker, the part that the reason why we find ourselves inclined, though, nonetheless, to support this bill is because actually what it does is it exposes the sham that was started by Nick Smith and continued today by Nikki Kaye of pretending that the ACC system was in deep, deep trouble under the Labor government. Because the part that we strongly agree with is the part that says, actually, the system's doing so well that the residual levies that were put in 1999 in order to cover the full-time life costs of injuries and accidents, the system is going gangbusters. That residual levy's likely to be able to come off much earlier than planned. That very act exposes the sham of Nick Smith trying to pretend that the whole system was bankrupt. That's what he tried to tell the country. It was utterly wrong, and this bill proves it. Why would the residual levies be coming off much earlier than planned if that was in fact the truth? It clearly was not the truth, and this bill proves it. What did the government do at that stage? They pretended the system was bankrupt. They hiked the ACC levies way up. The national government hiked up ACC levies and then kept them at an unnaturally and unnecessarily high level for years. And by their own admission, in order to prop up a failure to get the government's books into surplus. Well, what a rip-off. What a rip-off that has been for every worker and every company in New Zealand that have been paying those ACC levies. Mr Speaker, I'd be much more fond of this bill if, in dealing with accident compensation, financial responsibility and transparency, it was a sort of bill that fixed up the shambles that Nikki Kaye has created over ACC motor vehicle levies. Because if it did that, it would have my full support. What a shambles. It has been like watching a slow car wreck happen, actually. I was going to say train wreck, but in this instance, it's a slow car wreck, because before those new ACC levies with these risk ratings came in, 24 models amounting to about 115,000 cars had to be reclassified because she'd simply got it wrong. She'd simply got it wrong. The travesty is, she then went and convinced the Honourable Michael Woodhouse to use exactly the same sort of risk rating process to decide what was a high risk and a low risk industry, and wow, did that work? Because now we know that worm farms are more dangerous than cattle farms, of course. What we find out from Nikki Kaye is that cars that have exactly the same safety specifications, are exactly the same model, but have been called a different name in Australia, actually are more dangerous than each other when it comes to the New Zealand environment.
The car makes them dangerous.
Because simply putting that Australian information together in with the New Zealand crash data has been a complete and utter shambles. It has also resulted in thousands of New Zealand motorists being overcharged their ACC levies for their motor vehicle registration, and that continues because while the Minister accepted that she'd made a mistake in 115,000 instances, and that was on day one. Still, today, when people raise their issues with ACC about other mistakes they have made for other models, they are refusing to acknowledge that, and they are not refunding those ACC levies for those motor vehicle registrations. And so again, we have the government overcharging thousands of New Zealanders for their ACC levies, and that needs to stop. Sadly, Mr Speaker, this bill won't achieve that, and I look forward to debating this further at the committee stages. I look forward to the National Party actually agreeing with an amendment coming forward from the Labor Party, supported by Business New Zealand, to stop the rort.
Hear, hear.